Hey everyone, welcome to a webinar presented by Landlordology and Cozy. I'm Lucas Hall. This webinar is entitled How to Ensure a Flawless Move-In and Move-Out. I'm talking about tenants, I'm talking about renters, I'm talking about getting them out of your place and into your place as fast and as cheaply as possible while still delivering a high quality customer service experience, and how to do it by saving a ton of money in the process. So I would like to move forward. What I think, when I thought of flawless move in, move out, which I've done a lot of, it reminds me of a diamond, right? It's just perfect. And it is flawless. It's smooth. And I've got two tenants here in this picture, Sarah and Mark, and they're fictional tenants. They're not actually mine, but Sarah's moving out, Mark's moving in. How do you make it happen with zero vacancy? Right? I think generally speaking, the reason why this particular webinar is so popular and why we have a full house tonight is because vacancy is the number one cause of money loss. It's the highest expense typically in a rental business. You lose the most money because you don't have your place rented, right? I mean, I could pay to replace a roof 5 times over, but if I have like 3 or 4 months worth of vacancy on a decent sized property, then I'm going to lose a lot more there. So anyway, point being, there's a lot you can do to make it smooth, but the ideal situation and how I consider a move in, move out as a success and making it flawless is that there is no vacancy. Just to share with you, I've been a landlord for quite some time. I am a project management professional. That's basically a term for I can get stuff done. I'm able to take a project and help explain it simply and coordinate the pieces to make it complete successfully and to achieve something. So that's a real certification. I used it mainly as a IT consultant, working a lot for different government agencies. But while I was working full time for them, I was also building a real estate portfolio. So I am a landlord of about 10 years. I have 5 properties and 17 tenants at any given time. Those properties are anything from single family homes to condos to vacation properties in a different state. And then probably how you know me best or how you came to know me was through Landlordology. Landlordology.com is a baby of mine that I founded a couple of years ago, but later got acquired by Cozy. And now I work full time as their chief landlordologist, and I'm helping to educate and just build a community with landlords across the nation. So I speak at conferences all over. I meet new people. I help counsel people through comments and forums, and I just try to help them be more ethical and make more money through their rental properties. Cozy, I'll talk about Cozy in a little bit. That's an instrumental part of being a landlord, I think, or even a property manager. Oops, pardon me. I've got this new mic. But also, I am a family man and a puppy daddy. And you can see my Twitter signal down there. It's my Twitter handle's at Landlordology, so real easy to find. I actually bought my first property to impress a girl. That's my story. I have a girl who I liked. I was young. She was 23, I believe, and I saw her once a week. And I said, "Hey, how was your week? What'd you do?" And she goes, "Oh, it was pretty good. I bought a house." And I thought, wait, what? You're not married. You just moved to the area, and I know, she worked for National Geographic at the time, and I knew she didn't make that much money, and yet she was affording a decent sized house. And I was like, that's incredible. How are you doing that? She goes, "Oh, it's real easy. I was able to get a mortgage, and I am finding 5 of my best friends, right? Like people on Craigslist that she didn't know, and basically found people to rent out the rooms." And I thought, wow, she's smart and pretty. Well, I decided to try to go after her, and I really liked her, and so I did the first logical thing I could think of, and that was I called up her sister, who was a real estate agent, and I said, "Please go find me a bigger house in her neighborhood." And she smirked and said, "Okay." Sure enough, a few months later, I had a house in her neighborhood that I did the exact same thing with. I went and found 5 people off Craigslist to rent the rooms, and those people paid for my mortgage. So that's how I got started. I was living in my own house for free and was able to save up a lot of money and do a down payment on a condo, and then moved over there, and then continued down that process. And eventually I got married to her. So it worked out okay, right? It worked. Gentlemen out there, if you're looking for tips on how to impress a girl, go buy a house. Well, so we got married, and we recently just had a little girl. She is about almost 4 now, and we recently adopted her from Ethiopia. I love talking about landlording and adoption. If any of you are interested in adoption, feel free to shoot me an email too. I'd love to hear it. But this is my family. But this is my firstborn. His name is Bear. He's a 90-pound golden doodle, and he's awesome. So I am a pet lover too. This is Landlordology. This is the site that I started. It came out of necessity, where I didn't really feel like I had a landlord community to belong to. You know, there were lots of sites out there, but a lot of them were guru sites that were going to sell you $1,000 course, or giant forums that were so burdened with other things that I didn't really care about, that I wanted something just for me, just for small landlords, for me to learn easily, and I wanted it to be free. So I built it, and this is how it started. And it got really big really quickly, and there was a huge demand for it, and eventually it became part of Cozy. I was really happy with that, because Cozy built software and I built, content, and together we were trying to raise the quality of landlords in this country, and it just seemed like a really good fit. So that's what I do now. On this site, you can check it out. It's landlordology.com. I'll reference it a couple times throughout the night. Cozy is free property management software. It's completely, utterly free. I can't stress that enough. It's designed to be free for landlords. It's designed to be free for property managers. It can handle 1 unit, or it can handle 300 units. No matter what you have, you can collect rent online for free. You can do credit reports, screening tenants, and background checks completely free for you. Cozy is really doing well. It was backed by Google. They got their seed money. We got our seed money in the very beginning from Google. They said, "Go conquer the world. We love what you're doing. It's definitely needed. We need to disrupt the rental business." And so we said, sure. And currently we have about 30,000 landlords and managers using Cozy to manage their own properties. 10,000 applicants have been screened, and we process millions of dollars in rent every single month. And I think it's upwards of 140 million a year now. So it's growing a lot each month, actually. What Cozy does, as I mentioned earlier, we do online rental applications, credit reports, background checks, and rent collection. Those are the four, in my opinion, those are the 4 key areas of property management. Sure, there's other things like maintenance requests and repairs, but the bare essentials of what you need and what you need to function well are these 4 things. So essentially what Cozy is doing is it's providing these things in a process, right? So you start out with online applications to get people in the system, then you screen them, and then if you like them, you collect rent from them. And if we can do these 4 things extremely well, it will solve 95% of your problems as a landlord or manager. And that's we firmly believe that, and the fact that people are flocking to this shows us that we're right. So, all right, I see some questions coming in already. All right, thanks guys. Okay. Continuing on, this is why you're here, the move-in, move-out process. Now, I don't want this to scare you. Please, please don't leave. This is a detailed process, but it makes perfect sense, right? It kind of is common sense, and it just you need to understand the different steps. So I have this chart in front of you. I want to pull out some things. I'm going to reference this chart every time we go through one of these steps. I'm going to refer back to it so you know where you are in the roadmap. And everything to the left of the dotted line is an outgoing resident, a tenant that's leaving. Everything to the right is an incoming tenant. And so the process overlaps with each other. So you're dealing with this old tenant as you're dealing with a new tenant. And you have to do that flawlessly in order to reduce your vacancy down to near zero. Oh, and I forgot to tell you, one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about this is that using this technique, using these steps, I've successfully been able to manage 5 properties and hundreds of tenants over the last 10 years, but about 17 tenants at any given time. I've been able to successfully do this and have only 1 month of vacancy on a single property or a single unit over 10 years. And I was actually very heartbroken when I couldn't find a tenant fast enough and I had that 1 month of vacancy because it ruined my perfect batting average, right? But that's not bad. That's not bad over 10 years. So I hope by the end of this presentation, you will understand the general process, and then feel free to add in your own bits and pieces and things that make your business work, because your business is not going to be like exactly like mine, and mine's not going to be like yours. It's going to be custom to your audience and to your location, and you need to work it like that. If you try to follow my example to a T, it may not work in your area, but you have to adjust it. So this is the framework for you to finesse, and we'll walk through each of these steps. So let's continue. First, let's say you're not going to renew a lease, right? Or the tenant decides that they're going to move out. Well, I think there's a couple things. I'm having trouble with the clicks. Let's see. Okay. You want a tenant to leave, the lease is expiring, or the tenant wants to leave anyway. First and foremost, make sure you give them plenty of notice. And just a little more housekeeping. If you want to take a picture of any of these slides, I actually put a lot of the bullets in here so that it was easy to kind of take a picture with your phone. Or if you know how to do a screenshot on a PC, there's actually a button that says capture screen or screenshot. On Mac, I think you have to do Shift Command 4, and that'll take a screenshot too. So that'll help you if you need to snap pictures. But just download the PDF guide too. That'll help. Okay. Anyway, tenants leaving, or you don't want them to stay, so give them plenty of notice. I always suggest giving 60 days notice of non-renewal. So with fixed term leases, they aren't going to typically renew automatically. Some states and some cities do force a lease to renew automatically, but generally speaking, a fixed term lease is a fixed term. There is an end date stated in the lease, and so it doesn't automatically renew because you've already told them about the end date back when they signed it. However, I still think it's critical. So give 60-day notice of non-renewal for fixed term leases. I think that even for month-to-month leases, as much notice as you can. Usually it's a month, but in some states you have to give 60 days. I recommend 60 days always, and actually require that in the lease. If you want them to give you 60 days notice. Don't always raise the rent. This doesn't really have to do with move out, but it's rather if you want somebody to stay, then you can use that as your bargaining chip. I will gladly not raise the rent on a tenant who pays on time and is a great tenant because I want them to stay. It is so much cheaper for me to have a tenant stay that's a quality tenant over the long run than trying to raise the rent even 3% on them. You'll find landlords or other people out there that'll say you always have to raise the rent. Get in the habit of doing it. I think that you shouldn't. I think you'll make up for it later. So when that tenant eventually leaves, usually I think the average stay for a tenant is between 2 and 3 years. A lot of my tenants only stay 1 year because they're really young and they move around. But I price my rentals pretty high anyway and have a high quality product. And then when they leave, I raise the rent 10% for the new tenant because the new tenant doesn't know any better. I just up the price in the advertisement and then try to market for that. And that's how I make up for it. So that's my easy way to do it. And my tenants tend to love that. When someone's moving out, generally speaking, when you were giving them notice to leave, make sure that you send them instructions on what to do. So I actually have a 1-pager or a 2-pager now that tells them, hey, listen, you've got to cut off your utilities, forward your mailing address, make sure you account for all the keys. You've got to clean. You've got to return the place the same condition it was in when you moved in. And then here is a cleaning list. If you do these things, it will satisfy my requirements. And I think that's okay, right? I mean, people don't want to be judged against rules they don't understand. So if you just outline it for them and say, please do this, then they won't have an issue. I think they'll typically do it. And fourth is that if you give them a cleaning list and say, this is the requirement, and they don't do it, then you have more of a justification to withhold the security deposit to do whatever you needed to do satisfy the lease. All right. Okay, we got a couple of questions coming in. Okay, some about state laws. I'm not going to answer those right now, but I'll show you where you can find that. We can't see the chart. Oh, Tim. All right. Tim, can you see the chart now? Let me know. Okay, thanks. I'm reading the questions. This is awesome. Okay. Do you have examples of your cleaning list? Yes, I do. I do. You know, maybe at the end of the presentation, I'll see if I can find my cleaning list. I'll see if I can drop it into the handout section. That way you guys can customize it and use it however you want. Okay, great. You guys can see the chart. So currently right now, there should be a chart, a diagram, I should say. It's probably not a chart. It's a diagram with a bunch of little boxes on your screen. If you don't see that, then let me know. Okay, Tim, you're on an iPhone. Oh, okay. Shoot. Okay. Well, Tim, let me know what you do see, actually. I'm curious. I might be able to help. Okay, great. So next step, and this is going to go a lot faster, so bear with me. Next step, after you tell the tenant what you are, after you tell the tenant that you're not going to renew, and you've given them a date that they have to leave by, then you essentially want to start listing the unit, right? You want to get on that because you know you're going to have a vacancy soon or an opportunity for a vacancy, and you want to prevent that. Okay, listings and showings. This is the second step in the process. This is your first interaction with a possible new tenant. And what I do is I tell landlords, and what I do is I host showings and I start listing anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks out. I even, I start sometimes upwards of 60 days is when I begin the listing process. And I typically use Craigslist because it's really great in my area, but also I use Postlets, 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 and Postlets.com is a Zillow company, but it's fantastic because you can create a profile and a listing, and it will syndicate it to like 14 different sites. And then if you have to make a change, like you want to lower the rent price or whatever, you can just make a change in one place, and it will make the changes all over. So I really like that, and it's free. I do showings 4 to 6 weeks out. I mentioned that. Craigslist and Postlets are still number one. Those are my hot commodities. And then number 3, this is really simple, but it makes all the difference in the world. You really want excellent pictures, and I say pictures, oh pretty, because you want pictures that will pop and stand out. You want almost professional pictures, but if you can't hire a professional, then borrow a really good camera, or get like a not a fisheye lens, but like a domed lens, a little bit, just slightly domed for your iPhone or something like that, just to help with the quality. You basically want applicants, people who are interested, potential tenants who are browsing these sites, to come across yours and say, "Ooh, pretty," because that's what they're gonna do. They're gonna think, "Oh man, that's an awesome kitchen," or "Oh, that's just a really great picture," and that is gonna perk their interest, and you want to get them to look at more. They're never going to click on an application link if they never dive into your listing. So pretty simple. These are elementary type things, but pictures make all the difference in the world. If you don't have pictures at all, or horrible pictures that have bad lighting, then you're shooting yourself in the foot, and none of this other stuff is going to work. What I do typically after I find people who are interested is I do something called a landlord's open house. Now I'm going to explain that really quick. I don't know if I coined the term, but I definitely like it. A landlord's open house is not a typical real estate open house, but basically it's where I start listing a property, let's say on Monday, and I price it high but well, and I want people interested. So I'll say in there, "Hey, listen, I'm showing it on Friday. If you're interested, let me know." And I will, over the course of the week, I'll get emails and inquiries, and I'll do pre-screening efforts, and I will schedule them for a Saturday. I will say, if you if you want to come see the place, I'm showing them between 1 and 4 on Saturday. How about you come by at 1:30? And I find as many people as I can to come see it, and I put them back to back, 30 minutes apart, back to back, and I'm really only having to go to the house once that week, and then I have to show it to 6 or 8 different groups over the course of a couple hours. The reason why this is awesome is because then I can tell my current tenants and I can say, uh, please guys, like, I love you, but just go find somewhere else to be for 3 or 4 hours. Like, go to a movie or go out to a late lunch or something, and just give me this house. You don't have to leave, but I'd really appreciate it if you did. It's just less awkward for everyone. And what I love about the open house is that my tenants typically don't mind doing that. They think, okay, well, if he can get 6 people in and then get a new lease, then I don't have to be inconvenienced anymore. Let's get it all done in one day. Uh, and as people start to come to the house, half an hour apart, showings usually take between 15 minutes and a half an hour. And occasionally they will cross paths as one's leaving, the other one's coming in. And what that does is it creates this frenzy, kind of like blood in the water, like for a shark. But it creates this frenzy that they think that there's a lot of interest, and there is. You've got a bunch of showings that day. But it's just better than if you had a showing at 10 a.m. and then one at 4 p.m. because not only do you have people who never see each other, but now you have to wait around for all that time. So that's a landlord's open house. Give it a shot. It's worked for me. I'd say probably about 80% of the time I have one or multiple deposit checks or holding deposit checks in my hand at the time of the showing. And what I do is I say, hey, listen, I'll hold your check. If you want to apply, go apply. Here's the application link. Go fill it out, and then if you're accepted, I'll just turn your holding deposit into a security deposit. But if you aren't, I'll just give it back to you, or I'll rip it up or whatever you want me to do. So no harm done if you get rejected. And they're usually pretty okay with that. Next, you move on to the application. So you have told the old tenant they're leaving, or they've told you they're leaving, and then you go list it, and then you show it at a landlord's open house, and now you have applicants who want to apply. So what do? One, first and foremost, use online applications. If you're still using a paper application, you're hindering your whole process and you're spending extra hours every time you do this just trying to deal with it. Not only is it hard sometimes to read their handwriting, but you often have to follow up and get information, and then you have multiple sources of information because they're emailing it to you or whatever. But then you have to keep it, oftentimes in a very secure location. So many states require you to keep any personally identifying information in some sort of locked file cabinet or a locked safe, sometimes in a room with a locked door. And so there's all these other requirements for safeguarding this information. Because if I had somebody's social security number on an application in my closet and I got robbed, then I might get dragged to court for liability because I didn't follow my state laws, and I could be possibly held responsible for identity theft because I kind of allowed it to happen. So I just don't even want to mess with it. Online applications will allow you to keep that data online securely, and you don't have to deal with it. Next, this is something that a lot of managers don't do. They oftentimes don't collect applications from all adult applicants. Common scenarios are you have a husband and wife or 2 spouses, and they apply together, but only one of them is employed. The other one stays home or is a kid or unemployed or whatever, or not is a kid, but stays with the kids. And they think, well, this is the only one with an income, so that's the only one that needs to apply. That's not true. You need to review and screen every single adult. Minors, they're not a big deal, right? If they're under 18 or whatever the adult legal age is for your state, you can ignore them. And in fact, I don't think you could pursue them anyway if you wanted to. Even if you had them sign a lease, it wouldn't hold up in court because they're a minor. So minor is not a big deal, but adults, absolutely. You need to screen them. You need to check their income. You need to check their credit report. You need to check their background information. What happens if you have one applicant who's the breadwinner and they're clear, but maybe the spouse has an arson record, or I don't know, maybe they have some massive criminal activity. You just don't want those type of people living in your house, and they might burn your house down. So this is also a common misconception. Most people, and I will say this is a best practice, but it is a best practice to accept the first qualified applicant, but it's not law. I've never been able to find it as a statute. I've actually employed a lawyer to research it, based out of, I don't know where he's based out of, but California has a couple things about this, but none of which are actually statutes. So a lot of times you think, okay, well, this person applied first, so I should give it to them because they're qualified. Well, what if you had a landlord's open house, or what if you had 4 or 5 people that, applied overnight? Well, maybe they might only be a few minutes apart, and the second person that applied is significantly more qualified. What if they have a few $1,000,000 in the bank, or they I had a tenant once who both he and his wife were neurosurgeons at Berkeley, and they each made $600,000 a year. And I was flabbergasted. My jaw was on the ground. I thought, you're the perfect tenant, right? But he was fantastic. And he actually wasn't my first applicant, my first qualified applicant. He applied at the same time. So it is a best practice. If you have two people who are about the same, qualified, there's no significant difference, and all things equal, then you should accept the first qualified applicant. It keeps you out of any sort of discrimination lawsuit. But if you have somebody who is significantly more qualified and a lot less risk for you as a business, then there's no reason you can't, right? And what you can say to the first applicant is, I'm sorry, we've just decided to go with someone else. If you are a lawyer out there and I am speaking incorrectly, please send me an email. My email is lucas@landlordology.com. But I've done a lot of research on about 45 of the states in this country, and I'll show you where to find all that information, and none of which actually have statutes that show that you have to accept the first qualified applicant. In fact, California, in their Fair Housing Handbook, said that you should, or that you have to. Actually, they said that you have to. Except for in this handbook, they were listing the statutes and the actual laws to each of their points, except they didn't have one for that point. It was just weird. It was kind of like, okay, they can cite all these things, but then this point they're saying there's no citing. So I actually called up the Fair Housing Office of California, and I just said, can you help me figure this out? Where's the statute for this? And immediately they're like, hold on, please. And the next thing I know, I'm talking to the office attorney, and I just asked him the question, and he said, it's not a statute. It's just a best practice. It is a good idea, especially in fair housing. And I couldn't agree more, but it's not law. Okay, I beat that one to death. Okay, so we've talked about notifying them of a non-renewal, then talking to the new tenants about, or trying to find new tenants with listings and showings. Then you have people who are applying, which is awesome. Congratulations. Now you have to screen them. You have their information. What do you do? I think, and this is not going to be a tenant screening review. I'm going to give you some top tips. If you want to learn more about tenant screening, I actually have Tenant Screening 101 as a separate webinar. And the last 2 times we've done that, there have been so many questions that's gone upwards of 2 hours long, which is never fun, but I'm excited people are excited to learn. So feel free to jump onto that and look up that and keep an eye out. Number 1, this is the most important thing in tenant screening. Are they able and willing to pay rent? Everything else kind of falls into place if they're able and willing to pay rent. Meaning, do they have an income? Do they have enough money? If they are unemployed, maybe that doesn't matter if they have enough money in the bank. So are they able? And then are they willing? Do they have a chip on their shoulder? Do they kind of stick their nose up at authority? You look at past, maybe you do some conversations with past landlords, and you ask them, did they pay their rent? And they said, well, no, not always. Well, why? And he's like, I never found out. They just didn't feel like it. That's a red flag. So are they able and willing to pay rent? Everything else I can deal with, and I'll show you some red flags, but everything else I can generally deal with. Number 2, ask former landlords, and I always ask 2 former landlords. I think this is critical. A lot of times A lot of times when you're screening an applicant, you will just call their current landlord and say, did they pay? What happened? And while that person might have a you might have some good information, they also might have incentive to get that person out of their house. Like, what if the relationship has gone bad and they just want them out of the house now? They're going to tell you whatever you want to hear just so that person leaves. Because if you don't accept them, that means they have to stay in that house longer. But also, I think more importantly, if you call the current landlord or manager, that person is not going to know how the property was left when the tenant vacated because they're still living there. That tenant is still there and is not leaving yet, at least. So did they spray paint the walls when they left because they were angry at you for some reason, or did they just not clean up, or did they have all these repairs that they didn't actually document or tell the landlord about that could have been prevented 6 months ago? That kind of stuff you need to really figure out. And uh, you know what if that's the type of tenant that might actually try to sue a landlord for some ridiculous claim, for maybe a legitimate withholding from the deposit, but they went all out and tried to sue him in small claim court? You're not going to know that until months after that person moves out. So I always call the last two landlords. That was a long-winded explanation, but call the last two landlords because that second landlord is going to know a whole lot more. Next, you have to know your discrimination laws. This is huge, guys. If you write anything down, write these 7 things down. These are the federal 7, as I like to call them. This is what you cannot discriminate against at a federal level. Now, I don't think discrimination is right in any way, based on a lot of things, but yeah, I've heard of people saying you discriminated against me because of my income. It's like, yeah, sure, you didn't make enough. Like, of course I did, and that's not illegal, right? You can discriminate based on credit. You can discriminate based on criminal activity. You can discriminate based on judgments. All that stuff is fine, but these things are off limits. So, race, color, religion, sex, national origin, familial status, and disability. So I think color, religion, sex, and those are obvious. National origin, if you're not sure what that is, it's like discriminating against someone because of where they're from. It's not because of their citizenship. It's not, oftentimes in many parts of the country, you can discriminate based on citizenship. If they're not a U.S. citizen, you can decline them. Places like California, you can't. But national origin is like, oh, I don't want to rent to so-and-so because he's Haitian or because he's from Australia. Like, that's ridiculous. It doesn't matter. Familial status, typically when you say that refers to children and the size of their family, or if they have children or not. You can't discriminate based on that. That isn't necessarily talking about unions or marriages or anything like that, but just really the family unit. So an example is you couldn't pick a family of 3 versus a family of 5 just because that's the difference. Now, the family of 5 may not meet the occupancy requirements set by the county for your property, but that's a different story. So it depends on how many bedrooms you have and such. And then disability, that's the obvious ones are, handicap accessible or things that help someone live a normal life who might have some sort of disability, even like, someone who's blind or might have a seeing eye dog or something like that. You really can't discriminate against anything that helps them live as if they would without the disability. Now, what you do have to do is, if they want to modify your unit, this is kind of going down a tangent. If they want to change it, for example, if you find someone who's in a wheelchair and they say, I want to put a ramp up to the door, you have to let them. You actually, as long as it's not going to destroy your property or really damage your property or cause you a huge financial burden, you have to let them do it. And you have to, but I should say, you have to let them do it, but you don't have to pay for it. You can say, you pay for it, you take care of it, and in a lot of states, you can even require that they put enough money in an escrow account to put it back to the way it was, to remove the ramp when they leave. But you can't tell them that they can't do it. You just have to say, I'm not paying for it, but you can. And then, and they're okay with that, right? It's their disability. They need to to do that. You shouldn't have to pay for it. Okay, sorry. Next, know your state and local classes. This is huge. States like California have umpteen extra classes, protected classes. I think it's like 9 or 13 or something. The District of Columbia has 21 or 23 extra protected classes. Everything from sexual identity or gender identity to marriage, I'm blanking. Citizenship, things like that. So add those local classes onto your federal 7 and make sure you understand them, because just saying that you didn't know any better is never going to hold up in court. Number 5, this is a hot topic, and I've had lots of hate mail from this one, but so please don't email me on this. Number 5, sex offender is not a protected class. It's not a protected class. There's a lot of people who feel bad for sex offenders because oftentimes it can be a minor type of situation, but at some point in their life, a judge has ruled against them in an area of, claiming that they actually were convicted of a sexual offense, and we don't know the situation, we don't know who was the victim or what, but convicted against him enough, him or her, to say that they actually had to register, right? They have a part of that judgment is they register with the sex offender database. So I have never found anything that says you can't discriminate against sex offenders. The only thing I have found is in California, it says that you can't discriminate based on someone's name showing up on the California sex offender database, but that still doesn't mean that you can't discriminate based on the judgment or the conviction that might show up in a background check, and even there's debate on that, because I saw a letter from the Attorney General of California that said that sex offender is not a protected class no matter what. So I don't know, that one's up in the air. If you're a California lawyer, please email me, set me straight. But anyway, there's 2 links down there, an article we wrote also with the help of a lawyer, and then also the NSOPW. Leave it to the federal government to set up a crazy acronym and then give it a URL, but nsopw.gov is the National Sex Offender Public website. That is where you can research not only at a national level, but at a state level too. And you can actually, I hesitate to say have fun with it, but you could look in your neighborhood really and search by area and see who's a registered sex offender. So don't spend too much time there because it gets a little spooky. All right, guys. I'm looking at your questions. Marine says, is it okay to accept a tenant if they have had a bankruptcy that was cleared? That's a good question. There's multiple types of bankruptcies, and some are more severe than others. Sometimes they're just restructuring, but the debts don't typically go away. And so, if they've cleared it and they've paid off their debt, that's kind of a, high five to them, because that's challenging. But it would just depend. You have to set a bar for yourself. So set that bar, say everybody has to meet this bar. And if your bar is no bankruptcies in the last 5 years or no bankruptcies ever, then you need to follow that no matter what. And then another question is, what if the landlord is a main office that only supplies verification and not in-depth tenant information? Well, there's not much you can do, because you can't pull that information out of someone who doesn't want to give it. I've often had issues with dealing with large apartment complexes when a tenant is coming from there, and I can't necessarily get that information from them. I think it's ridiculous because they're only hurting everybody else. But sometimes they want you to fill out a form. Sometimes they want the tenant to sign it. It's just wacky. But do your best, but definitely don't jump through a lot of hoops unless you think you absolutely have to. Okay, next, moving on. Approval and rejection. So we talked about 2 things. First, review and screening, and now you're getting ready to find somebody that you are going to approve or reject. I would say something I like to do personally is whenever I am going to approve somebody, that's an exciting time. That is like, hooray, exciting for everyone. So call them up, be super excited, tell them, congratulations, you won, and they will love you. right? They associate, everyone associates emotion with houses and where they're living. It's a home for them, and so if they can get excited about it because you're excited about it, they're gonna love your place even more than the day before. And then when they move in, they're going to be pumped. So be excited. If you have to reject them, I also call them over the phone because I think it's courteous, but I send them a formal email too, just to reiterate what I said. That way I actually put it in writing. Uh, Calling them by phone is oftentimes a good thing because it gives them a chance to think about it for a minute and then ask questions. You don't have to validate yourself, but you do want to be sensitive. So just be honest. You don't have to tell them all about the person that you accepted, but you do have to say, listen, you weren't accepted, we decided to go with someone else. Sorry about it. But or if there was a reason, tell them the reason. Just be honest. Say, listen, we don't accept people with criminal backgrounds, period. If you reject them based on something in their credit report, then you have to let them know what that is. And more specifically, you have to give them the ability to find that credit report. So if you're pulling hard inquiries, please stop, because then you have to share that hard inquiry with the tenant. Yeah, it's not that hard, but it's extra work for you. With Cozy, which is who I work with and for, I use their product all the time on my own properties. That's how I manage my 5 properties. They do a soft inquiry. So what that means is it doesn't hurt the tenant's credit, and they have access to it at the exact same time that you get notification, or that you see the credit report. So if you reject them, then hey, they already have a copy, problem solved. You didn't have to lift the finger to reject somebody other than a phone call, I guess, and an email. But you don't have to do anything extra after that is over. You don't have to give them a copy of the phone call or credit report, or tell them how to get to Experian or TransUnion or whatever. If you have been a manager for multiple years, you know exactly what I'm talking about. All right. Now, let's say you find somebody, you call them up, you say, congratulations, you're going to move into our place. I'm so excited. You are a perfect tenant, and I'm looking forward to working with you. They're excited too. They're calling all their friends and letting them know that they found a new place that's super hot. And now you have to seal the deal. So we're still dealing with the incoming resident, and we haven't gotten quite back to the outgoing resident, but you want to make sure that person's not going to back out on you. That is a huge issue, right? You find somebody at like 6 weeks out, and then at 2 weeks out, they decide they're going to back out just because you didn't have your stuff together. Let's talk about that. Okay, security deposits. I'm sorry, another question. Wow. Okay, Janice says, do you have a reference form that you used when a rental office requires it? I don't, because I've never successfully been able to get a rental office to accept my reference form. It just doesn't happen. They want their own forms done, and they want permission separately from the tenant, and they've got their own things to sign. So it doesn't do me any good. So I don't have my own form. It's not useful. Okay, deposits. This is how you secure a tenant. Number one, so collect the deposit before or at the lease signing. Preferably, as I mentioned earlier, when they say they want to apply and are super committed. So basically I tell them, I put it in their court, and I put it on them, and I say, if you want this place, then give me a holding deposit while we work out the application and work through the lease signing, and then if you get accepted, I will just turn that into the security deposit. And the benefit for you as the renter is that if you give me a holding deposit, it is being held for you, right? Assuming that you're going to pass through. Sorry, that is my phone going off. Okay, and they usually love that because they have a guarantee, assuming that they pass through the approval process. If they aren't willing to put money where their mouth is, then I don't deal with it. I say, okay, well, great, you can still apply, but I'm not going to take the unit off the market. I'm still going to collect other applications. I'm still going to consider other people. But if you want to prevent that from happening, then go ahead and give me a check. We'll deal with it that way. Next, document the deposit in the lease with a receipt. So the receipt can be a variety of different things. If you are collecting you know, if you're collecting, well, don't ever collect cash, but if you're collecting a check, just initial, like put it in the lease if you're doing it at the lease signing, and then initial next to it saying you received it, right? Make sure that you say how much the deposit is, and make sure that you say when you received it. It's just an initial and a date when you did that. You can also collect things like security deposits and other move-in charges through Cozy, which offers free online rent collection, but does a whole lot more. And so the beauty of that is they already have a receipt automatically through Cozy, so you don't even have to deal with it. And it's transferred electronically, which is awesome. 3, as I mentioned, holding deposit first. This is the only way I'm actually able to guarantee that I have some sort of security against someone backing out before we sign the lease. Because leases take a while, right? Don't they? I mean, we all have our templates. We all know what they say. We all know that we need a signature, or at least a digital signature. And it takes time, because if there's more than one adult applicant, they have to get together. They usually have to do it. Or even if it's online, they all have to log in and take the time to do that. So sometimes it can take like a day for online stuff. And then sometimes it takes upwards of a week or two, if you're really pressing them hard, to actually meet you to do it. So if they're local, I'll typically meet with my tenants at Starbucks and treat them to like a congratulatory latte, and I'll review the lease with them and do it that way. But electronic signings are just as fine too, or just as well too. You have to be sure that you know what your laws are on security deposits. In most states, you can only collect 1 to 2 months worth of a deposit. It does change, and some states actually don't even specify how much you can collect, but I would suggest sticking to 1 to 2 months, because if you collect more than 2 months worth of deposit, then it's just not gonna go over well, right? I mean, a tenant is gonna come up to you and say, wait, how much is that deposit? And then they're just gonna go rent the apartment down the street, which is only 1 month of a deposit. So it's hard for them to come up with the money, especially if they don't have a lot of assets to fall back on. Number 5, don't commingle funds. This is critical. So if you are a small landlord, make sure that you set up a separate bank account for just the deposits. You typically can have a separate account for all your deposits, but what I even do is I like to take it a step further, and if I don't have many properties, I will set up a bank account just for the deposits of that property or that unit. And so that way, truly, that money is separate. It's not commingled with anything. And as that money accrues interest, I know exactly how much interest that money has accrued. Whereas if it were commingled with everybody else's deposits, I wouldn't really know without a lot of advanced math. So that's what I do. If you have a lot of units, then that's just not feasible. So set up a simple escrow account that you can collect money on, or collect interest on, and then deposit everything there. But keep track of it with an accounting software like Cozy or something else. So make sure you know if you need to collect interest too. There's a link down there. Take a picture or write it down. It's a great guide on how to handle security deposits properly. All right, great. More questions. You guys are rolling them in. Holy moly. Okay, what companies do you recommend for electronic signings? I'm glad you asked. We'll get to that in a minute. While we're on this page, if you don't know where to keep your money, look at your state laws first, which I'll show you where to find them. See if you even are required to do interest and an escrow account. But what I like to do is use a company called Ally. You can probably find a lot of great accounts with credit unions and such. The ones at the big banks don't typically give a lot of interest, but Ally is fantastic. It's ALLY. They have a money market account that is like a checking account, but kind of has all the perks of a savings account. So you can write about 6 or 7 transactions a month. And so you have check writing abilities, but you earn a lot of interest. So just keep the deposit in there, and then at the end of the lease, just write the check from that deposit account. All right, moving on. Lease signing. Here we go. Kata, great. We're going to talk about that. Leases. Use a rock solid lease and stick to it. Yes. Can't stress that enough. That is like my number one tip, because so many people still do verbal agreements that are just ridiculous. Make sure you get a rock solid lease that's specific to your state and use it and stick to it. It doesn't do you any good if you start breaking the lease yourself by not honoring what it says. So make sure it has your state clauses in there. There are plenty of sites out there that will sell you a template specific to your state. I can show you, where to find it. There's a page on Landlordology called Services Directory. It's under Tools. There's a whole section in there about where to find great leases, and all of those are just sites that I think are fantastic for it. So I don't make any money off the referral or anything. I just think they're great. Okay, every adult applicant signs, or they do sign with joint and several liability. So this kind of goes back to having every adult, fill out an application, but you also want every adult to be on the lease. And then if there's minors, make sure you say how many minors. You don't necessarily have to list them, but just, make sure you say there's 3 kids, because that way it'll just document it really well. Joint and several liability is a legal term that basically says everybody is responsible for everything. Even if there's 5 roommates, which I have a couple houses that have 5 roommates in there, and they're all in their 20s, and then sometimes one of them will leave and think the other 4 will think, oh, I only have to pay 4/5 of the rent because that person was responsible for their portion, but they left. That's not true. Each one of them is responsible for the entire amount. So if you don't have a clause in your lease about joint and several liability, just go look one up. That URL has a good clause in it. Again, I am not a lawyer, so make sure that you have anything that I give you, make sure that you run that by your lawyer, because every state really is different. Number 3, review the entire lease with your applicants. As I mentioned earlier, sometimes I'll go to Starbucks and just treat them to a latte and say, here's the lease. Let's walk through it, make sure you understand it. But if they're not local, or if it's just not convenient to do that, I will sign it digitally. I think it's awesome. The e-Sign Act of 2000, which was passed way back when, says that digital signatures are just as legal as physical signatures, so there's no issue there. The 3 tools that I recommend are HelloSign, Sign Now, and DocuSign. Actually, Sign Now I think got renamed to CUDA Sign, kind of a funny name, but owned by Barracuda. But HelloSign is my favorite because it integrates with Google Docs and makes it really easy to keep documents there. And it's just very simple. DocuSign it is an amazing tool, but it also sometimes feels like I'm killing a fly with a cannon. It just has all kinds of extra features that I don't need for leases. Tools that like advanced lawyers use. So those are my 3 tools. Hope that gives you some interest. Karen says, can you repeat the name of the tool to track interest? Oh, good question. No, it's not a tool to track interest. It's the strategy is just to keep the security deposits in their own bank account. So if you have a property, a single, let's say you have 5 properties, you'd have 5 bank accounts that you would keep each of the respective deposits in those bank accounts. And that way, the only money that's in there is the entire deposit. And as it accrues interest, it's obvious that that's from the deposit. So some states have a minimum amount you have to give, and some states just say you just have to do interest. So whatever it accrues, you give back to the tenant. And other states don't care. But it's not a tool. It's just a way of segregating the money. Okay, Sherry says, how do I get the deposit collected by Cozy into my account? Great question. That is exactly what Cozy specializes in, money transfer and tenant screening. So any money that goes from their account will automatically go to your account. You don't have to, it doesn't go into a holding account with Cozy. Cozy actually never touches the money. The transfer is literally from one bank account to your bank account. And so it's just automatic. There's no fluff. It just does it. So it'll just show up. So you just have to tell us where you want us to send the money. That's it. Okay, on to number 4 of leases. Mandate online and automatic payments. In most states, you can specifically state in the lease, you will pay rent online and through the tool of my choice. I use Cozy, and so I'll put that in there, and I'll actually say, you can go to this URL, and this is where you would sign up for an account, and you'll see your lease, and you'll be able to make payments that way. What I love about it is it not only gives them a copy or lets them see the ledger so they can see all the payments from all the people in that house that they share a lease with, but it just makes it extremely easy for them to set up those automatic payments. You can do single payments if you want, but I actually say in my lease, you're going to set up a recurring payment. That way, if they don't do it, then it's a lease violation. I don't know if it's an evictable lease violation. I've never actually gone to court for that. I don't know if a judge would hold that up, but it is a lease violation. And I can say it's a lease violation. You need to fix it. You need to set that back up again. Now, would I actually force them to if they still paid rent on time? Probably not. But put it in your lease so at least you have the option. All right, I feel like I'm talking fast. I am so excited that everyone is here. I just love talking about this stuff. If I am talking too fast, please ask a question. And I'll repeat whatever I need to repeat. Okay, number 5, last but not least, provide a copy of the lease to your tenants. When I was a tenant, it was probably about 12 years ago. When I was a tenant, I walked into a 300 unit building to sign a lease. The lady said, I've got 15 minutes to give you and I've got to go off to another showing. So here's the lease. And it was a stack that was like yay big, right? I mean, it felt like 300 pages. And she literally took 299 pages and flipped it over. And on the last page, she's like, sign here, hurry. And I said, I don't even know what it says. And she goes, well, it's okay. You can read it later. All right, well, that's pointless, right? Why am I signing this? And then on top of it, she took it and didn't give me a copy. So how am I going to read it later? It's not online. It was a paper lease. So anyway, I didn't like that apartment complex, but I was there for a year and a half, and I eventually got a copy after begging. But that's just wrong. Make sure, even at the lease signing, what I do is if it's a paper lease and I'm actually having them sign, I will print out, 4 copies or 3 copies, how many ever applicants there are, and I'll give them just a signed copy that I've signed, and I'll let them kind of sign it amongst themselves, but I'll take one that's the master one that they sign. So make sure you do it from the get-go. And then just email it to them. I keep everything electronic too. All right, so you've signed a lease. Congratulations, right? You have a tenant who is excited and they've signed it. You have a deposit. You have money. Like, it is a great, amazing feeling when someone finally does all that. And you know that they're going to move in. Otherwise, you get to keep that deposit, I suppose, as compensation. But you still have to deal with your old tenant. It's all well and good that you have a new tenant, but you have to make sure that that old tenant moves out. And if they don't move out, then you have huge issues. So, guys, I know it's 9 o'clock. I will hurry through this, and this is actually part of the quicker part, so it's going to go fairly quickly. I just love telling stories. Okay, so now we're at the move out phase. This is how you encourage your outgoing resident to actually move out. What I do and what I suggest is that I always provide an initial inspection if requested. So, I want them to succeed at moving out. I want them to feel good about it. I don't want them to fail, and I want them to clean well. So what I'll do is I'll offer and say, hey, if you want me to come over and just tell you what needs to be done, in addition to that cleaning list, then I'll do that. And I'll point out the things that you need to repair so you have enough time to fix them before your lease is up. They usually like that, but not all of them take me up on the offer. But I think it's worthwhile, because then if they can repair something, then I don't have to, right? Number 2, don't throw away any abandoned personal property. A lot of people think, oh, the lease is over, I can just take their junk and just put it in the dumpster. That's not always true. Sometimes you have to keep that property, safeguard it, and then give them proper notice to come pick it up. I know it's ridiculous, but anything, you don't want to throw away anything of value and then have them come back and sue you over it. Like, what if they had, their grandmother's engagement ring that was worth $20,000 and you just happen to throw away because you were throwing away a pile of papers? Make sure that you safeguard it. The easiest thing to do is just take all their stuff, put it in a spare storage room or closet, or somewhere away from the unit so you can get another tenant in there. If you really kind of want to be nasty, I suppose you could just take it to a storage facility, actually put it in their name and pay the first month's rent or whatever, and just say, here's the place. If you want to get your stuff, you have to go pay the bill and then get your stuff out. But if you don't, then it'll be like Storage Wars, where they break into your unit and auction off your stuff. So that's one way to deal with it. Again, each state has their own laws on abandoned personal property. Last, or maybe not last, but third, final inspection should happen within 24 hours of after the move out and return of keys. So don't wait too long. If the lease is over and they've moved out, make sure you get over there quickly and do an inspection or have a representative do it, because if you wait too long, then they can claim that that damage wasn't there when they left. It happened after the fact. So you don't want that to ever happen. And after you do that final inspection, never, ever, 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 there's not enough evers here, but don't ever let the tenant back in the property, at least not without supervision. Number 4, this is a common misconception, but a tenant need not be present for the move out inspection. A lot of them think that they do, they have to, or they have some legal right to. I can't think of any states that force that, but I do think it's a best practice. So if the tenant wants to be there, I will always let them. I never say no. But I'll even go as far as to say, if I'm scheduling a move out inspection, I will schedule it according to what my schedule dictates and what my handyman or whoever else, and I will say, it's happening at 4 o'clock on Friday. If you want to come, you're more than welcome to meet us there. And that's all I'll say. Sometimes they show up, sometimes they don't, but at least you gave them the option. You don't have to work it around their schedule. If they come back and say, oh, I'm in class that time, it doesn't really matter. If they really want to be there, that's fine. They'll figure it out. All right, so now they've moved out. Hallelujah. So now you have a tenant who has a signed lease and they're moving in soon, and a tenant who is now moved out, and now you have to turn over the property very quickly because you don't want any vacancy. So this is where the magic happens. I utilize something called move-in, move-out times. This is very common in the hotel industry. When you check-in's at 3 o'clock or 2 o'clock sometimes, and checkout's always at 10, 11, or 12 in the morning. So in my lease, I will say the lease term is from, let's say the first of the month at 2 p.m. in the afternoon is when you can move in, and it goes until the 31st of, let's say it's a year lease and it's the 31st of the month before at the end of the term, but move out is by 10 a.m. So what that does is it dictates when the actual lease ends by the period, the time. Otherwise, it will kind of default to midnight or 11:59 of that day, which you don't want. But if they move out by 10 a.m., that gives me 28 hours, right, to deal with anything that might happen before the new tenant moves in. I love it. I mean, honestly, I can do a lot in 28 hours. So from 10 a.m. one day to 2 p.m. the next day is 28 hours. I could fix almost anything in 28 hours, assuming that I know the issue is there, and I can hire and get quotes, hire contractors, get handymen, or whatever I need. I can get them over there, and they can all do it. I can even replace a whole house of carpet in 28 hours if I need to. So that's what I do. Utilize move-in, move-out times. It is one of the smartest decisions I've ever done. Put it in the lease. Line up your contractors prior to the end of the lease so that they know they're coming over between that 28-hour period. And then if you can't be there because you have a lot of properties, you have another job, whatever, you can use a lockbox if you trust them. Because at this point, the tenant has moved out. The only person, and their lease is over. So there's no liability to the tenant, and the new tenant hasn't moved in yet. So the only liability is to you. Is that contractor going to damage your property? Well, probably not, right? Because he wants to get paid. So it's pretty safe. You can use the lockbox with a key in there and just give them the code to access it. Make sure you keep all records and receipts and estimates. If you don't have a receipt for services that you performed for cleaning and you want to bill it back to the tenant, then you can often do an estimate. Oftentimes, good faith estimates will be accepted. That's a few people know that actually. But work hard. I've spent many hours working really, really hard many days working really, really hard during that 28-hour period, and it is miserable. I'm not going to lie to you. It's the roughest part about being a landlord. But what I do is I want the place to be immaculate so that when the new tenant moves in, that's how they have to leave it. That's the rule. So work hard and fast, and after the time period's over, it's over, and you can move on, and you can go back to going on vacation and being a landlord that gets passive income. So, I'll do that every time I have a turnover. All right. So you've successfully moved out the tenant, you've cleaned the place, repaired it, made it nice, and now you want to collect first month's rent. Okay, a lot of times people collect first month's rent with the lease signing. That is perfectly fine. That is exactly what most people do, what most property managers. I think that that's a wise choice, but sometimes it's not possible. Sometimes it's hard for a tenant to pay a deposit, especially if it's a large deposit, and pay that first month's rent all at one time. So what I say sometimes, if I need to, I will say, give me the security deposit now because that'll cover me if you bail, and then just pay me the first month's rent by the time you move in, like before you move in, because you're not getting keys, until that happens. Prepaid rent, and this is basically first month's rent. So when I say prepaid, it means it was just paid before it's due. Most of the state laws oftentimes max that out at 1 month's rent. Oftentimes, even in California, it'll state that it has to be first month's rent. So the old premise of collecting first and last month's rent, a lot of people still do that. I think it's unwise. I think that a lot of times it's against state laws to collect more than 1 month. But some people still do it. I honestly don't think last month's rent is worth the trouble. The reason being that in a lot of states, you have to actually keep that as in a separate escrow account, collect interest on it, track it separately from the deposit, and you can't use it for anything other than rent. Oftentimes the tenant will forget completely, they'll just go crazy and pay you again. But let's say you collect a security deposit and a last month's rent, and then they exceed their deposit in damages. Well, you often can't use that last month's rent to cover your damage. You have to give them back that whole thing if they double paid or something, even though the damages are way more than the deposit. It's crazy. So if you want more security, which is essentially all last month's rent is, just collect a bigger deposit. It's not hard. If most states allow 2 months, so just do 2 months. Okay, keys. So now that they have given you first month's rent, whether that's on the day they move in through Cozy or the day that you sign the lease, whenever it is, you say clearly you're not moving in, you're not getting any keys until you pay that, and you're not getting any keys until the start time of your lease. So, for example, if your lease says 10 a.m. is when it starts, then make sure that you don't give them keys before that. It's really simple. I would say what I do is I put the burden on the tenant and I say, hey, listen, you can have the keys. You have to come get them, and they will do that at 10 a.m. Or if you want to, the night before, you can put them in a lockbox or you can put them in the mailbox if it's safe around your area, and just don't tell them until 10 a.m. At the time the lease starts, just send them a text message or call them up and say, hey, it's move-in day. I hope it's going well. Here's how you get into the house. So, but don't give them keys before that because they will want to move in earlier. They will put their stuff in there, and that's a hassle. If you have if you're repairing the hardwood floors and all of a sudden they move in a day early because you gave them keys earlier. So, if you can allow them to move in earlier, I think it's fine. It helps everyone out, but charge them for it. Just say, sure, we have to put an addendum on your lease. We have to sign a new, just a one-page document saying the lease is starting a day early, and you have to pay for that prorated day. It's just as simple as that. They will often say, no, thank you. They'll just deal with it. Whatever their sad excuse was before suddenly goes away when they realize they have to pay for that day. And then make sure that you document the number of keys in the lease. So in every lease that I have, I will have a little spot that just says, I gave you 5 keys. It's really critical that you actually document that, because if you don't, they will give you back 4 keys and they will say, oh no, it was only 4. You only gave me 4. And now you have a key that's floating around out there in the world and you have no idea where it is. Like, did they keep it? Did they lose it? They're not fessing up to anything. So I'd hate for, some accident to happen or something bad to happen because there was a key floating around. Even if it's just for 1 day or 2 days before you change the locks, you don't want somebody to get hurt because someone had a key that wasn't supposed to. So make sure you document it. If they fail to give you all of those back, or if they give you, one time I gave a tenant 3 keys and I got back 6. That's weird, right? So they made a bunch of copies and they're not supposed to. So I prohibit copies in the lease. I say, don't make any keys. If you do, you are responsible for changing the locks. Like, we are going to get it done and you're going to pay for it because you're not supposed to make copies. So make sure you have your keys under control. Next, they move in. It's move-in day, right? And how do you do that? How do you inspect the property? What I do is I allow all of my tenants to perform their own move-out inspection, or move-in inspection, excuse me. And the reason I do this is because I truly believe that they need a say in that whole situation. They need to approve what it is that you're saying is the condition. They need to have a say. How in the world can you hold them responsible for something that you might have done all by yourself? So, and I've seen a lot of judges do that too. They say, it's like, well, you did this separate from any knowledge of the tenant, so the tenant didn't approve or deny this, so it's not valid. So make sure your tenants do it. Hopefully, you've already inspected the house with a move-out inspection, and you inspected the all the work that was done, so you know the condition. You know that the tenant, or what condition that house is in, and if the tenant tries to pull a fast one on you and say that there's a hole in the wall, and that hole in the wall was there when they got there, even though it was because of their oversized couch, you'll know, and you'll just say, that's not true. I've got pictures to prove it, and you can deal with it then. I always like to give them a welcome gift. One of the more popular posts on Landlordology is an odd one for sure. It's called Bathroom Essentials for Move-In Day, I think. And basically what it is, it's where I describe what I give. I make up a little basket, or I just set these items on the countertop for them when they move in. I'll usually buy them a singular roll of paper towels in the plastic. I'll give them a little toilet paper roll, usually kinds that are wrapped up individually, like Scott tissue. I'll buy them a little bar of Dove travel soap, and then what is the other one? A little bottle of shampoo sometimes. And a shower curtain. And so, they've been moving all day and they're really sweaty, and all they really want is a shower curtain, or to take a shower, but they usually can't because they haven't thought about shower curtains, and they don't realize the shower curtains don't come with the property. So, I'll give them, actually, I take that back. It's not a shower curtain, it's a shower liner. It's the clear, just plastic liner. You can buy them for like $2 at any store. I will do that, and all of that coming together is about $10. So for $10, I actually communicate that I'm a knowledgeable landlord and that I really care about their move-in, and I wish them well. They love it. I used to give like Target gift cards and Starbucks gift cards, or even pizza. I'd order them pizza when they moved in, but I never actually started getting a genuine thank you until I started providing toilet paper. So what does that say? Next, follow up with them with a phone call. So on move-in day, after they've started, just give them a call. Just check in with them. Usually nothing's wrong. Just say, I want to know how it's going. Do you have any questions? And usually they will have questions like, oh, I can't seem to find the key for the back door, or where's the main water shut off, or where's the electrical panel? I did have a tenant once ask me for where the main water shutoff was, and my next question was, okay, what's broken, right? Because why do you care about the water shutoff right now? And he was just a great tenant and wanted to know where it was. Thank God. So always follow up. All right, they're moving in. You've made them feel warm and fuzzy. They are loving it. They have everything. It is time to celebrate. I love these little guys. My 3-year-old daughter thinks she's a minion. She really does think she's a minion, and when she dances, it feels like this. So, ice cream, blow that tube, and just make it a party, because now it's officially good, right? You have a tenant in there; they're going to start paying rent. Your old tenant's out. That place is cleaned up and in great condition, and everything is fine. So that is reason to celebrate. Hallelujah! All right, now you have to go back to the old tenant, the outgoing resident. They've moved out. You've kind of dealt with the new tenant, got them moved in. They're happy. Now you have to deal with the security deposit. If you have damages, you have to make sure that you know what you can deduct for. So a lot of times people think they can just deduct for anything, and that's not true. You have to have legitimate financial or physical damages that you can itemize. So you can do that for unpaid rent. You can do that for cleaning, especially if in the lease they were required to clean to a certain level, or you gave them a clean out sheet or what, and they didn't do it. You could return it to the condition it was in when they moved in, minus normal wear and tear. Any other damages, physical damages, like they busted a hole in the wall or they took a door off and it's broken, but you cannot withhold for normal wear and tear. There's no set list for that, really. There's understandings, but there's no federal definitive state list because every property is different. Okay. Also, you can charge them for things like keys. If they lose keys, have them change the locks, charge it to them. Or if they stole your chair, let's say you provided a furnished property and all of a sudden your couch is missing, like you can charge that to them because that was your stuff. So this is a very general list. There is a lot more you can charge to, but generally speaking, just the litmus test is that you have to say, is there an actual damage here? A lot of people think, oh, they moved out early, but they paid all their rent or whatever, but or maybe they were smoking. That's a better example. Maybe they were smoking. They violated the lease because they smoked. Well, you can charge them for the cleaning to get rid of the smoke smell or the new carpets or whatever, but you just can't withhold their deposit in full without some sort of receipt to show that you were working to repair it. So that's a common misunderstanding. Once you itemize all that, you got to give back all or part of the deposit. So make sure you send them that itemized list before refunding. This is key. This is critical. All right. This is a very emotional part of the process for the tenant and the landlord. But make sure that you produce that list, put it in PDF format, and scan in your receipts or whatever. Send it to them. I often do it during email or via email, and I will say, this is what you're getting withheld, and here are the receipts to prove it. I never send them money at the same time. The reason is I think that you have some power if you hold that deposit hostage while they review your list. It's possible that your itemized list is wrong. Perhaps you said they stole your KitchenAid mixer, and in fact they just put it in storage in the basement and you didn't see it. That's possible. So then you'd have to return the other mixer that you bought and go get the one, they didn't steal it, so they shouldn't have to pay for it. But, help them look at it and then hold it hostage. And if sometimes they will argue that stuff, well, go ahead, argue it over email, deal with it, work it out. And when they finally kind of come around and you come to an agreement, that's when you may either alter your itemized list or you just pay them what it says. So you'll have some sort of email documentation to go through it and show that they kind of agreed to it at one point, and it will make it it'll make it more challenging for them to sue you over a deposit later. I will tell you that small claims court, it deals with a lot of stuff, but I'll tell you a good portion of all of their cases have to do with security deposit refunds. So you can use estimates that you might get from damages to withhold money, even if you haven't spent the money yet. That'll often work and be held up okay in court. I'm not a lawyer, so don't take that as legal advice, but I will say if they broke a giant window and it's going to take 4 weeks for the window to be manufactured, you can get that quote and sign the contract and get that money, that list, and then withhold that money and then just replace the window when the time comes. So that'll usually hold up. And make sure that you know what the limit is on how long you have to return the deposit. Every state is different. It ranges from, I think, 15 days sometimes up to 60, and some states don't even say it. But I think most common is between 30 and 45 days. But make sure that you know that, because that is critical. Make sure you get that money back to them before that deadline. All right. So I never like to leave a presentation without giving you a ton of resources. And thank you all for sticking with me. It's 9:25. I've got a few more minutes, and then we'll take questions and answers, and we'll go through that as long as you want to. So resources. So these are awesome tools to help you through this process. So one is Landlordology. It's the site that I founded, has a ton of articles, a ton of great roadmaps for you to walk through. For example, the state laws. If you look at the middle of the screen there, you'll see 4 icons. These are 4 of the most popular resources. We summarize all the state laws for you, or at least the majority of them. We have a services directory where we don't make any money on it. We're just referring quality providers that I think I've either used myself or I think just provide a great service. Landlord guides, and then a roadmap to the landlord lifecycle. The state laws, this is currently, I think we have a few more filled in since this picture was taken, but we've done all of the green states, so and then Mississippi too, I believe. Landlord guides. So I've written all of these. These are definitive guides to help you be a landlord. What this was based off of was the red one. It's the tenants or landlord's guide to tenant onboarding, and it walks through the move-in, move-out procedure in more detail. But we also have ones for rent collection, tenant screening, and then marketing on Craigslist. You can access those and download those for free at landlordology.com/guides. And last, Cozy. Cozy is the reason I'm able to manage my own properties and have a full-time job at the same time. It is an awesome tool. It's completely free. It helps you collect rent for free, screen tenants with credit reports and background checks, and it's incredibly easy to use. Like I said, it was seeded by Google, but it has some of the biggest investors in the industry, and it's making revenue. It's great. It is free for landlords and managers, but it is not free for tenants. This is a picture of a sample credit report, and I actually want to show you maybe what that looks like in more detail here. All right. I don't want that. Let's see. There we go. Okay. I think you guys can see this. Here is a sample credit report from Cozy, and what I love about it is it shows you the credit score, and then it shows you the amount of credit used, which in this case is 47%. But then it goes into the monthly payments. This is common for every credit report. It goes into how much is this person, Mr. James Hacker, how much is he spending and what's it going towards? And that's important. But my favorite part, and the thing I look at most on a credit report, is how much total debt do they have, and what does that mean? Where does that money go to? So it's fine that he might have $200,000 in debt, but is that $200,000 in a mortgage? Maybe. Is it $200,000 in medical debt because they broke their back in a car accident? Maybe, or is it $200,000 on a credit card? Like, those are three very different situations and require you to know which one is which, because if you don't, you're going to have a tenant with $200,000 in credit card debt and they're not going to be able to pay the rent. So you need to know what type of debt it is. That is so critical. Then it goes into how many accounts have ever been late and how long has it been. And then it continues to go into each of the trade lines. So any form of credit they might have, it gives you a 2-year history. It shows you what the original balance was, what the current balance is, and if they had any mishaps over the course of the last 2 years. I typically don't fret over anything that's older, like a year or two old, especially if it was just one late payment. It's not a big deal. But if it was like the last 4 months in a row and they didn't pay their $500 bill, you better believe that that's going to cause you an issue because they're not going to pay their rent. An example of a background check. This is actually an example of two. It's not blowing up for me, but it's hard to see. But basically on the left there is an example of a cleared background check where it shows all these little green things. And then on the right, it shows an example of a background check that came back as a recommendation that you consider this applicant because there's some issue there. And in this case, it was a national criminal search and a county search came back positive for in this case, I think it was arson, which is a felony. So these are just examples. These are not real people. But it does go through Social Security verification, eviction search, sex offender search, terrorist watch list, and then a criminal search as well. And that's, especially evictions, that's really all you need. So between those two things, you'll be covered, and it's super easy. What I love about using Cozy for these tools is that I can actually require them as part of the application. So when a tenant's filling out that application, they have to purchase these and go through that identity verification process, which only takes a few minutes. Purchase these, and then when they get a copy and I get a copy. So by the time I see their application for the first time, it has all this stuff on it. So it reduces my screening efforts down to just a few minutes. Well, it actually takes me about an hour each time I review a group because I'm calling other landlords and things. But the general credit report and background check stuff is just a few minutes to look at. Wow, that's great, guys. A ton of questions. Um, Maureen is asking, can I do a background check after the lease is signed? Sure. I mean, you can. You can do that with Cozy, but there's not much you can do. I guess I suppose if you had a lease, a clause in your lease that said if you lied about, any criminal convictions or anything, then I could terminate it because of that, and then you'd find out later. But typically they're already in the house. You still have to go through the eviction process if you want to kick them out. So it doesn't do much good there. Um, Jason asks, are there any plans to add these features to Cozy? I'm not sure which features you're talking about. Jason, feel free to add. There we go. Jason, does Cozy have a way to report late payments to credit reporting agencies? No, and we actually do that on purpose. We don't do that on purpose. Uh, Currently, Experian is the only people report or collecting late payments or using rent as part of their system. And even though we do use Experian, they have been through lawsuit after lawsuit from every credit associated company on the planet, it seems like, because the data is not validated, right? Just because a landlord says the rent is late doesn't mean that the rent is actually late. It just means that maybe there was a habitability issue. Maybe the landlord is a slumlord and didn't provide water to the place, and the tenant didn't want to pay his rent and withheld it. Like, there's lots of reasons why a tenant can withhold rent. So it's not fair to report that without the big picture. That's not to say that if there was a judgment for that rent in small claims court, that would show up in your credit or in the background check and possibly the credit report too. And at that point, then it's fine because it's a judgment. But it's not wise. I don't think it's wise or morally ethical to just report late rent without both sides of the story, without having a judgment. Okay. Anyway, I'll get to the rest of the questions in a second. Going back to the presentation. This also just came on my desk recently, and I wanted to mention it here. Sometimes we have we have companies that we partner with that really, I just think they're a great tool. Again, we aren't making any money on this. We aren't charging anybody anything. This company called Community Buying Group, basically you sign up for a membership, which is usually $99, but they said, hey, if you put us on your site, we'll give that membership to all these people for free forever. You don't have to pay any money ever. And what it'll get you is 5 or up to 7% savings at Lowe's all the time, 40% off Sherwin-Williams paint and flooring. And I love that because I have a Sherwin-Williams paint store down the street, and I have, my little membership number, and I just give that to them and instantly takes off 40%. If any of you have ever bought expensive paint, that's like $100 a gallon sometimes for the really nice stuff. And, take $40 off just because I signed up for this. Again, I'm not going to know if you signed up for this. This is a completely separate company from Cozy and Landlordology. We don't get anything from it, but I just think it's awesome. So if you want to save a ton of money during this renovation, move in, move out process, then this is a fantastic tool. So check it out. There's the URL where you can use that special URL and you'll get that free membership. Landlordology.com/go/CBG, which stands for Community Buying Group. And if you do sign up, send me an email and just let me know. I'm curious. I think it's a fantastic thing. I want to know if you guys do too. And again, Cozy is provided, or Landlordology is provided by Cozy, and it's the greatest tool in the world, I think, honestly. Even if I didn't work there, I would be using it to manage my own properties because it works. So I see one question coming in about those credit reports and background checks. How much do they cost? Great question. They are $19.95 each, or $34 if you bundle them together. So that's a savings of $5. It is completely free for the landlord or manager, but the tenant does pay for that. So you'll never pay a dime, but the tenant will. And I think that's fair. What I do is I typically just tell my tenants, hey, listen, I'm not going to collect an application fee, but if you want to apply, there is a credit report and background check that you have to pay for, and it's $34, and that's just your application fee. And they usually don't have a problem with it because that's a reasonable amount of money, and they get a copy of all that stuff. So they actually get the tangible thing that they can review, and it feels like they're getting something for their money, even if they don't get the unit. So that's how I do it, and that's how Cozy makes their money. We charge $19 or $34 for both on each, and we make a little bit of money off each one, and that we dump back into the business, and that helps us to allow rent collection to be free for everyone, not just landlords and managers. All right, guys, let's go through questions. I am going to scroll to the top here and kind of go through and see if I can find some of the earlier questions. Thank you for being so attentive with me. We still have almost everybody still on the line here. This is fantastic, and I know I flew through that, but it still took like an hour and a half. So I will go through these questions, and if you have a question for me, just type it into the right-hand side of your screen where there's a little question box, and I will just roll through them. Okay, let's see. You guys, awesome. Downloading materials, perfect. Maureen, by law, is a property manager required in North Carolina if a landlord is not in North Carolina? That's a great question. I have never ever seen a statute in any state that says you have to hire a property manager. They're not going to tell you how to spend your money. However, I have seen in some states, I think it was New Mexico, where if you weren't in the state as a landlord, you needed to have some sort of representative that was within X number of miles of your property, usually very large, like a few hundred miles, just so you could have somebody attend to the property if an emergency came up or something bad happened. But it never says it has to be a property manager. It could be a handyman, could be a relative, could be a friend, I don't know, it could be the neighbor, just somebody that you can designate as a local. And I always think that's a good idea. If you're not a local landlord, then make sure you have somebody on the ground who can kind of report issues to you if you need to. Okay. All right. Christy says my paid pros have not even been close to that. Oh, Christy, I wish I had seen that earlier. I'm not sure what you were referencing, but hope that's a good thing. Okay. My issue in California is to collect for damages. This is Sam from California. My issue is to collect for damages on remaining rent after they move out. Yes, Sam, that is a hard issue. When you have tenants who move out and they still owe you rent, how do you collect on them? Well, you first, and I think this is the proper way to do it, first you go to small claims court, because since they're already moved out, you don't need to go through eviction court, but you go to small claims, win the judgment, and then you can file it with the collections agency. Don't skip that judgment part, because you could be held liable if that debt is not actually accurate. So anyway, go to a collections agency. I also have done or considered doing wage garnishments. That's something that is very popular, especially if they have a reputable job. Get that judgment and get that court order to do a wage garnishment. And that's a lot cleaner and a lot easier than a collection agency, because a collection agency typically is not going to be very successful. They have the lowest success rate out of any industry. For landlords, they have the lowest success rate. It's worse than dentists. So landlords typically don't get their money through collections agencies. Okay, the cleaning list. Yeah, let me see if I can remember. I'm not sure if I even have that, but let me keep going here. Okay. Great. Okay, Katrina, in order to rent rooms, do you put exterior door locks on each room? That's a great question. If I do put locks on each bedroom door when I rent out rooms, but they don't have to be deadbolts. They can be just door locks on the handle. I think that's always critical. So you never want to put something in there that you can't get through as a landlord if you need to access the unit. So never put like an interior lock that you can't use a key for. But yeah, I definitely put a lock on there, because that is their private space. They need access to or the ability to make it secure. Thaddeus says, how do you arrange a showing when a previous tenant is still there? I just tell them, hey, listen, guys, I love you, but go catch a movie for 4 hours and just let me do my thing. And they usually are cool with it, because I try to keep a good relationship with them, and I don't want to make them mad, and I want to get that showing process over with quickly. I usually tell them, if you leave now and I get 8 people coming through, like, maybe I'll find somebody and we won't have to do this again. That usually is pretty motivating. Okay, Lauren says, would online applications work in a very, very low income area? Many of the tenants applying don't have the means to submit an online application. Well, with Cozy, which is what I use, they can actually apply through their smartphone. So they may not have a computer, they may not have internet access at their home or their business, but most people I know nowadays have a smartphone, or they at least know somebody who does. So they can still go to the URL that you give them, the little application link, and they can still fill it out on their phone and even order and pay for things that way. It's really simple. So no need to worry about that part. Worst case scenario, if they really don't have any internet access or they don't have a smartphone, you could take your laptop and just go meet up with them and say, here, use this. All right. All right. Janice, you had asked earlier, maybe I misunderstood you, but do you have a reference form that you used when a rental office requires it? I think I understood you to say, do I have a request form that I send them to get information from them? And I don't. But I do have a landlord reference template that's on Landlordology that if somebody wants a reference from me, I usually just use this letter, this template, and that's on there. If you just search for landlord reference, you'll find it. Okay, how do you have an online application if you do not have a website? I'm glad you asked. So if you sign up for Cozy, which is free, you'll get an online application that has its own unique URL. So for each of your properties, you'll have a little URL that you can give your tenants, and that will be unique for that property or that unit, and they can just fill it out that way. So you don't need a website. That's the bottom answer, is that you don't need a website. Cozy will give you that URL and host it for you for free. So it's pretty slick, actually. Karen says, I have a property manager. Should I ask the PM for a copy of the deposit receipt? You just need proof, Karen. You need proof that a deposit was taken and that lease is being upheld. I hope that there was a deposit. If there wasn't a deposit taken, oh man, then you were probably a tenant, Karen. Okay, maybe I'm confused. If you're a landlord, make sure that you get that make sure there's an understanding that they did collect a deposit, and ask them even maybe where they're keeping it. But if you're a tenant, then yeah, you go back to it. Just have them initial that you sent it in, or better yet, go back to your bank statements and see if you can find a copy of the signed check that you might have given them. Yeah, okay, wow, so many questions. That's awesome, guys. Thanks. This is Sherry, how do you get the deposit collected by Cozy? I already answered that. I'm sorry. Electronic transfer is how you get the deposit electronically. How do you handle showings when you're not local? This is from Maureen. How do you handle showings when you're not local? I just usually either will pay somebody to do it. Sometimes I will hire my tenant. If they're a good tenant and I have a great relationship with them, I'll say, and I've done this before, I'll say, hey, listen, I'll give you $25 or $50 or whatever the demand is to have this showing. For each showing you host for me, and if you clean up and make it presentable, I'll give you $25. If that applicant signs a lease with me, I'll give you another $100. So there's motivation for that tenant to clean up, and be presentable and then show the unit, because, for maybe like 20 minutes of their time, they might get $125. That's not bad. So anyway, that's what I do. I do have a vacation property in Colorado that I sort of self-manage. I do have a property manager on the ground that I rely on for the short-term rental stuff, but not the long-term, just because I need somebody on the ground to handle keys a little bit easier. So it's tough when you're long distance. Okay, Lynn is asking, are e-signature tools free? Some of them are. Sign Now and HelloSign will both offer free packages, but all of them will offer paid packages, and you get lots of different features. My favorite is HelloSign.com. Mary says, why not have the tenant deposit rent directly into your bank account? That's a great question, and that's a whole nother presentation on rent collection. But basically, the gist is, in order for a tenant to deposit money into your bank account, separately, kind of independently, you just say, go to my bank and do it, is that you have to provide them with your bank account information. That is a horrible idea. That's a horrible idea. you have to tell them your routing number and your account number. I will never, ever, ever give my tenants my account numbers. And the classic argument is, oh, well, it's on the bottom of all your checks. It's like, yeah, but I'm not writing my tenants checks. I'm not doing it. Like I don't have a reason to pay them until I have to refund the deposit. And by that point, they're already gone. So I never give them my account number. And the reason why is because very smart people out there that are tech savvy can figure out how to scrape money off your account, even with the best of banks. But more importantly, this is the big reason, they have access to deposit money whenever they want. Okay, Lucas, well, what's wrong with that? Well, what happens when you want to try to evict them? You've terminated the lease because they weren't paying their rent, and you go to court, or you try to set up a court date and you file this eviction, and all of a sudden they go to the bank and they deposit $2 into your account. Well, they owe you $2,000, but they gave you $2. Well, guess what? You've now collected rent, and that will stop the eviction. That's a horrible thing to happen, because now you have to wait another month or two for all it to start over again. So never, ever, ever give them your account number. If you want to do that, besides it not being very convenient for them because they have to drive to your bank, but you could set up what's called a deposit-only ATM card. Now, this is the only other recommended way besides electronic transfers that I like to promote. And it's where you call up your bank and you say, I want a deposit-only ATM card given to my tenant. His name is blah, blah, blah. Here's where you can send it. And they'll get a PIN number. They'll get like a little account with that bank, and they can just drop money in the ATM with that debit card. And it's kind of the same as giving the account number, except they don't actually have your account number. And they can deposit whenever they want. But if you have to evict them, or you're trying to, you can just call up the bank and cancel that debit card. You can just say, get rid of it. It won't work anymore. And therefore, you are effectively stopping them from paying. Now, with tools like Cozy, and this is why you don't want to use tools like PayPal, but tools like Cozy, you can actually just push a button and say stop payments. And so it will actually prevent them from making any more payments to you when you need to go through the eviction process. Hope that helps. That was a long-winded answer, Mary. Okay, so Marine again is asking, can I add the requirement of auto rent payment after the lease has been signed? Probably not. Once you sign that lease, it's a contract, and you nor the tenant can edit a contract unless both parties agree. So you can't add things after the fact. You just have to make it better for the next term, or heck, just ask them. Maybe they will want to do it that way. Okay, Jason is asking, isn't it better and safer to sign a lease after the tenant in case they write something in? It's a great question. Yes, it is. So when I do digital signatures, I always let the tenants sign first. They can't really write anything in with a digital signature. But if I'm doing an in-person lease signing, I will, I'll be there, right? They're not gonna pull a fast one over me. Like, I'm gonna watch them do it. And I'll sign copies of that, but it doesn't matter if they write on their copies because it doesn't match my copy, right? So if I needed to prove that I have the original, it's pretty easy to do. Okay, Jeff asks, hi Lucas, how can you collect keys from move-out tenants? You just have to ask them for it. That's the bottom line. I usually tell them, hey, if you're leaving and there's a self-locking door, you can leave them on the countertop. Make sure, I even tell them how many keys I am expecting, and original keys, not copies. So just make sure that they understand they have to turn in those keys. If you want to collect it from them in person or have them drop it off somewhere else, that's fine too. Just make sure it's clear. That's the easiest way. It's easy for them to forget. They're busy moving, so it's easy for them to put it on their keychain and just drive away. I've had that happen, and you just have to call them up and say, you better get back here within the hour with these keys, otherwise we're going to have an issue. Okay, Joy is asking, I forgot to include a move-out time in my current lease. Is there something that I can do to add at this point? Again, no, you can't change a lease once it's been signed unless both parties agree to it. So sure, you can ask your tenant. Maybe that'll be okay. And maybe better yet, just when the time comes, just say, hey, listen, I need you out by 10, and just kind of force it on them. You can't really force it, but just say, move out time is at 10, or say I'm coming by at 11 to do the move out inspection, and the place needs to be cleaned and all your stuff moved out by then because it's the last day of your lease. Maybe they'll push back, maybe not. Maybe you'll get away with it. But make sure you put that in for the next lease. Karen says, in the state of Maryland, you can collect a max of 2 months deposit. Thanks, Karen. That's awesome. Rose is asking, are you required to disclose if someone had died in a rental or had HIV or other disease? Ooh, that is a good one. The answer is, well, federally, no. But in certain states, possibly. I am not familiar with the California rule on that, but I'm pretty sure I remember reading something about that. But I actually think it's a privacy issue. Those are not actual things that cause value to drop in a property, especially in real estate. Those are just things that people think cause the value to drop, and it's not fair, nor is it right. So, but I would check with your state laws, especially if you're in California. Okay. Well, actually, here's another thing too. I live near Washington, D.C., and the houses are like 100 years old. And so almost every single one of them has had somebody die in them at one point or time. So, that's kind of a given that someone has died in them, at least back in the early parts of 1900. Okay, Thaddeus says, what is tenant will not pay last month's rent? You already have my money. What if the tenant won't pay last month's rent? Yeah, if you already have the last month's rent, then the tenant shouldn't pay that last month. They've already paid it. Now, if they're just sticking it to you because they said, oh, you have my deposit, why don't you use that as last month's rent? That's a different story. That is a lease violation. That's non-payment. You can terminate their lease typically within about 3 days, and then start the eviction process. So they need to pay rent all the way through, unless you actually collected last month's rent, and then they can stop a month early. But it doesn't matter for the deposit. Sherry says, can't they make copies anyway? Sure, Sherry, yes, tenants will make copies all the time. It is something they just feel like they're entitled to do, even if you put it in the lease. Now, if you find out about it later and they turn in copies without really realizing, just forgetting, then you can certainly, and I suggest you would, change the locks at their expense. Okay, Karen asks, is the PM required to provide inspection info to the landlord? Oh, I sure hope so. You should check your management agreement that you have with your property manager, and if he's not sharing that information with you, then that's something you want to negotiate in for the next revision. It depends on how much you want to be involved. If it's a vacation rental, you probably don't want to be too involved, and just trust they're doing it. But a lot of times I know property managers just don't have time, or they cut corners and they don't really address it. So I want to be involved. I want to be an active landlord. And if I had a property manager, I would want to see, the inspection sheet, so I know how people are treating my property. It's my asset. I want to stay involved. It's worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Okay, Ethel says, what happens when a tenant refuses to perform an inspection after having been asked several times by the property manager? Then it stinks to be them. So I always give the inspection sheet. I give a move-in inspection sheet. I think that's what you're talking about. When a tenant moves in and they don't perform that inspection, well, you have the paperwork from the last move out and you know what the condition was. Hopefully you were taking pictures. And if they refuse to do that move-in inspection sheet, then shame on them. It's only going to hurt them later. So when you come back at the end of the lease and you say, hey, listen, remember that broken window? Like, you did that. And they can say, oh, it was like that before. Well, they don't have any proof because they never did their inspection sheet and they don't have anything to stand on. So it's only going to hurt them. It's not a big deal for the landlord, though. Okay. Lynn is asking, after our tenant left, we did the cleaning to return it to move-in condition. How do we charge for that if we did not utilize a company? Lynn, that is an awesome question. Thank you. Thank you for asking that. I'm glad you did, because the answer is you can't. I know, you can't charge a tenant for the cleaning that you might have done on your own. You got on your hands and knees for hours and scrubbed that floor. I'm sorry. The reason is because you're probably not a professional maid service. You're not a company that has an itemized price list. If you were, then you could refer to that price list and say, this is what I charge other clients for the same service, so that's what I'm going to charge you. It's a fair and reasonable price. But if you're just making up stuff, like even if it's affordable, let's say you charge $10 an hour for your time, that sounds okay, but you have no evidence to show that your time is worth $10 an hour for cleaning or for carpentry or cabinet repair, whatever, like, because you're not an expert in that. And if you have a cabinetry business, then just use your price list and bill them that price. But if you don't, then you can't bill anything. You can't bill for your labor unless you are a service trade professional. I think it's always wise, simply because of that, to not mess around with the cleaning unless you're willing to just eat that cost. So if they didn't do their job and they didn't clean like they were supposed to, I'll just hire a cleaning company, even if it would take me maybe 2 hours to do the job. I'll just say, sorry about it. This is how it goes. And that way I'll have a sheet, I'll have an itemized receipt, and I can just bill it to them and there's no question. Jeff says, tenants usually hang paintings or photos on the wall and cause hole damage on the walls. How do you charge tenants for the damage? Well, it's simple. You charge them for the things that you paid for to repair it, right? So if you had to get a bunch of drywall repair kits to make it happen, or buy drywall or mud or whatever, you can charge that to them. Now little tiny nail holes to hang small pictures, that's just normal wear and tear. Bigger nail holes or bigger issues where they ripped out some drywall, specifically like when they're trying to hang a flat screen TV on a wall and they mount it and they put in like 1/4-inch holes in the wall. That's a bigger issue and that can be repaired. But the little tiny stuff, I'd say buy like a $2 bottle of just hole patch and walk around with your finger and spend 15 minutes filling in the holes. That's what I would do. Sherry says, how long do you have to return the deposit? And Sherry, great question, but that is state by state. So go to landlordology.com/state-laws, and you'll see your state there most likely, and you'll be able to just research it. It's usually in the top section of each page. Kat, hey Kat, great to have you. If you are evicting a tenant for breach of contract, do you have to return the security deposit? It's most likely that the repairs will not equal or exceed it. Again, the security deposit can only be held if you have actual financial or material damages. So it doesn't matter if they break the contract. I met a landlord, I've actually met multiple landlords who try to keep the entire deposit because the tenant decided to get a pet. And it's like, well, did the pet do any damage? Well, no, and in fact, it was a golden doodle and it didn't shed. And, so there's really no damage at all. Can I still keep the deposit? Well, no, you can't. You don't have any damages. So it has to equal damages. Breach of contract does not equal damages. It just means they can't continue with their contract. So they may have violated the lease somehow, but unless you can itemize it with receipts, I wouldn't withhold anything. All right, Jason. Oh, again, that was the question. Okay, let's see. Okay, great. Thaddeus says, I had a situation where a tenant did not pay their last month's rent because they already had her money. What is the best way to handle this? I think you asked that earlier. That's the security deposit, I think. Yeah, you just use the security deposit if they don't pay rent. All right. Okay, Sherry says, can I use a realtor lease and that I find online for California, or does this make it void since I'm not a realtor? That's a great question. I don't think so. I don't think it makes it void. A contract's a contract. It's just probably on a realtor template, but you don't need to be licensed to use that information. I'd be surprised that you got it because usually that's distributed only to brokerages. But I believe that there's probably a better lease out there for you. You just have to find a good template online. Go to landlordology.com/directory and look at some of the tools there, and then have a lawyer look at it in your state. Okay, Angela Potts. Sorry, last name. I have a promissory note in place for back rent, but tenant hasn't made any payments. Should I still go to court first before reporting the bad debt? Absolutely. Go get the judgment, because without the judgment, you have no third party that's an authority to say that your debt is actually legitimate. I mean, what if you go and report it to a collection agency and cause all this damage to their credit report, and then they sue you, and the judge says, "Oh, I don't think that was legit." Well, now you've caused all this damage, and you could be responsible for paying him because you've damaged their credit, and the judge didn't agree with you. So go get the judgment first, then you can do a lot of stuff. Christy says, what clause in your lease do you add that ensures existing tenants will allow a showing for re-rental? I literally have a clause that says you have to let me in to show rentals with X amount of notice. So I will say, in my state, it's 24 hours notice before showing up. But there are state statutes in every state that dictate how long you have to give notice. Well, I should say most states have that. Some states don't even specify, but typically 48 hours notice is fine. And if you give proper notice, then the tenant can't refuse you. They can't refuse to let you in. So you don't need to put it in your lease, but I do it anyway. Thaddeus, okay. Thaddeus says, don't forget about the cleaning list. Okay, I will walk with me through this. Thank you, sir. Let's go here. Cleaning list. All right, I'm looking for my cleaning list for Thaddeus, for everybody else. Let's do that. I know it's getting late, you guys. Thank you for attending. It isn't over yet. I'm going to continue to go through the questions, and I'm going to try to answer those as best I can. And what I'm looking for now is the cleaning list for, I can give you. Survey. Okay. Why is this not coming up? Okay. You know what? What I'll do, I'm not sure if I have a template that doesn't have private information on it. So let me, let me email you guys later about that. Thaddeus, especially you, I'll make sure. But I have your email addresses from the registration, so I'll clean it up a little bit so I'm not giving out my personal stuff, and then that'll be an easier template for you. Okay, next, let's go back here. Okay. Again, sorry guys, I need to clean up that cleaning list before I give it to you. I wasn't expecting to dish it out tonight. All right, let's see. More questions. Okay. Let's see. What should I do if I've already given my tenants my account number to collect rent? There's nothing you can do. I mean, you could close your account down, but if you trust them, if you think they're okay now, then that's fine. Just finish it out. But for the next tenants, don't worry about it. Don't give them that account number. It's just too dangerous. Especially if that account number is like your operating account that you're running your business out of. Gosh, I'd hate to see them, buy $400 in liquor in China, over the web, which is what happened to my wife actually, because she gave out her account number. Okay, can you change this is Mary, can you change the cost for repairs if you perform work, supplies, or can you charge it? I'm sorry, can you charge the cost for repairs if you perform the work, supplies, and labor? Yeah, we already talked about that. You can definitely charge for supplies. I would not charge for labor unless you are a service professional doing that service, like carpentry, window repair, whatever. If you do that for a living, then go for it. But if you're just if you have another job and you don't do that for a living, then don't put a price tag on your labor. Shirley says, when I want to use Cozy, but what if the renter prefers using checks? That's fine. You can use Cozy to collect online rent from any of your tenants that do want to. And then for those who still want to pay with checks, and if you allow that, you can just document that in Cozy as well. So, for example, I have a house that has 6 girls in it that are all roommates. 5 of which use Cozy to pay, but one of which we worked out a deal where they pay with she pays her portion with a check. And so I basically get the automatic rent collection from those 5, and then by the first of the month, she sends me a check, and I click a little button, and what it does is it says record offline payment. And all I do in Cozy is I say, so-and-so gave me X number of dollars, and here's my little memo to go along with it, and then post it. And that just goes along with all those other payments, and it helps me track the whole lease balance so that I don't have to worry about keeping 2 ledgers. So it's really great. You can do that with any sort of payment. So you're just recording an offline payment. It works great for Section 8, actually. So you'd set up the Section 8 tenant with online payments, and then you would, when you get the rent check from the government for their portion from the Section 8 housing program, then you could record that as well and track all of it together. Okay. Lauren says, we won a rental property at an auction in April. Congratulations. That's great. They are now, the tenants are now month to month. The original landlord did not give them a move-in inspection or do that with them. They've done a lot of visible damage to the property, but have not kept it clean. So you might be seeing why you won that property, I guess. We're not sure what to do at this point. Do we have a leg to stand on once they move out? Chances are you probably don't have a security deposit either. It's tough. If you don't have that move-in inspection, or if you don't have any proof of the condition of the property it was in when they moved out, then you don't have any evidence. You can, scream at the top of your lungs that they punched a hole in the wall, but how are you going to prove it? So I would say unless you can prove it, then just don't try for it. You could try to make repairs that that they cause, and hopefully they won't argue it. But if they argue it at all and threaten to take you to court, I'd just give the money back, because it's not worth it, especially when you don't have anything to show a judge. Okay, Jason's asking, will Cozy allow us in the future to integrate their services on our own website? Yes, actually, that's coming very soon. We're going to have the ability to give you a list of all the properties that you're listing, any vacancies or anything, and you can apply right from your website. We'll also give some sort of custom branding if you didn't have a website. That's coming, yeah, for sure. Okay, Melinda's asking, does Cozy offer application templates? No, we don't allow customizable applications, but our applications do have almost everything you would want. So take a look at it. Chances are it'll work for you. If it doesn't, then I guess you could still use it and collect the information, the other little bits that you might want some other way, or you could just keep using your application that you currently use. All right. Sherry, I hope I answered your question earlier. Okay, Kat is asking, while I'm in the process of eviction for my tenant, the judgment won't be until November 2nd, which is a few weeks away. Obviously, it's unlikely the tenant will pay any rent before then. Can I charge him for those 2 days and take it out of the security deposit? Well, actually, so just because you get a judgment on the 2nd doesn't mean the tenant's going to be finished causing damage. Just because you get that judgment doesn't mean the tenant's going to leave. And that's why you would, though, go get a writ of possession. And what that is basically where you can go to the sheriff and say, Mr. Police Officer, will you help me forcefully remove my tenant? And they say, absolutely, where's your court order? And you show it to them, and they will go and set up a time where they will show up to the property, and they will physically remove the tenant by force, and help kind of guard the situation. And that is the formal form of eviction. So you can then have a locksmith come and change the locks, and you don't have to worry about that tenant getting back in because you're locking them out, and it's legal at that point. So that may be long after the 2nd. Just because you get that judgment, you might still have a couple weeks before that tenant is forcefully removed if they're hunkered down. So you can charge them from any actual damages that happen. So if they stay until the 25th of November, and that's when the actual eviction happens, then they've caused you damages up to the 25th. So I hope that helps. Okay, Thaddeus, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Okay, Mary is asking, can you provide information on how Cozy works with collecting payment. Is there a delay in the landlord getting paid? Yeah, there's a slight delay. Currently, Cozy collects money through the standard ACH system, which is what banks use to transfer money every day, every minute of every day. And that is a 30-year-old system that is regulated by the Federal Reserve. All transactions actually have to go through the Federal Reserve, so it does take between 3 and 5 business days for that money to show up in your account. So there's a whole page on Cozy about that process, very transparent about it. It's not the fastest in the world, but the way I figure it is if I collect a check, it's going to take me 3 to 5 days to find out if that check clears anyway, maybe sometimes 7 or 10 days. So this is real easy, and I don't have to think about it or do anything. Now, Cozy actually will be releasing very soon the ability to pay with a credit card. So a tenant could pay with a debit or credit card, and that will be transferred very quickly, like either same day, next day, and at the very latest, maybe 2 days. So that will be a lot quicker if you give that option to your tenants. Okay, great, you guys. That's awesome. It looks like I've hit all those questions. I did have a couple questions come through separately. Let me pull those up so I can address those in all fairness. Where is it? Right here. Okay, Bruce from Georgia is saying, does your lease contain a clause allowing you to show the home to potential renters prior to moving out? Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. It's real simple. You just have to say I can do it. But you don't have to have that clause because the laws for giving notice to show up to a property is usually 24 hours, and you don't need anything more than that statute, which is already in place. But I put it in there anyway. How do you oversee? Keith is asking, how do landlords oversee the property managers in this particular area? Well, if you want to be an active landlord or active owner, then you could kind of be a part of that property management process. But I bet I would venture to say that property managers, large ones, who you might be working with, probably don't want you in their business. They want your money. They want to take care of the tenants, but they don't want you watching over their shoulder. So it is difficult. Sometimes they just want you to let them do their job, which is understandable. But the best way to do it is to set up a management contract with them and spell out exactly what the expectations are. Karen in Virginia is saying, what is the best online rent payment sites other than PayPal? PayPal is the worst online rent collection site. It's fantastic for transferring money. However, few people know that in their terms of service, they consider rent to be a business income. PayPal considers rent to be only for businesses. So it should be a business. I think if you were collecting rent, it's a rental business for you. So they're right on that aspect. But what that means is PayPal won't let you collect rent through a personal account. And guess what? Their personal accounts are free, but their business accounts require that you pay them 3% or so, maybe 2.5% of the fee of the total amount. So they realize that lots of landlords and managers are using PayPal to collect rent, and they want their cut. I would be careful because what they do, and this happened to a friend of mine that I met on Landlordology, he was using PayPal. The 28th of the month came around, and PayPal sent him a very stern email and said, we have deactivated your account because you were collecting rent under your personal account, which is free. And if you would like to continue, you have to upgrade to a business account. And so guess what? It's the 28th. His rent is coming in like in the next few days. So what was he doing? Like he had to scramble and deal with like 30 tenants who are all paying by PayPal. It was a mess. So don't do it. You'll get caught. They have whole departments that figure this out. So I would use Cozy. That's my answer. I work with Cozy in full disclosure, but Cozy is fantastic. It's completely free and it works. It just works. Daniel from Florida says, will a recording be sent following the webinar? Yes, Daniel, thank you. You're the only one that's asked that. I usually get that question like 4 times before I even start the webinar. Yes, I am recording it now, assuming that technology works okay and that the recording actually records properly. There's no bandwidth issues. I will post it and I'll share it on a site called landlordology.com/replay. and that'll have the webinar replay when I actually get it up there. So thank you all. I don't see any more questions. Oh, one more. All right, Christy. Yes, you're full of them today. Thank you. Anyway, Christy's asking, any way to make a soft, I'm not sure what you're asking, Christy. I'm sorry. Okay. I'm not sure what you're asking. Sorry about that. But anyway, thank you guys for attending. It was really fun. And there are plenty more webinars if you want to attend, one on rent collection, one on tenant screening. And again, feel free to check out Cozy. It's cozy.co. It's completely free, and it works really, really, really well. Again, there's also this free thing that I think is just amazing. It's community buying group, and you get a bunch of discounts for joining. If you go through that link, we don't make any money. I'm just putting that out there. We're not getting anything from it other than helping you, and you get to save like 40% on paint and 7% at Lowe's and things like that. So have fun with it. Thank you all again for participating. If you have any questions that you want me to answer later, or you just want to follow up, my email address is lucas@landlordology.com. That's Lucas, Lucas, @landlordology.com. Thanks again, guys. Bye.